All right. Good morning, everyone. We have some attendees trickling in. Like we have the last couple of days, we're going to give everybody an extra 30, 45 seconds to get online, and then we'll get started. Okay. Hopefully that's given everybody a chance to log on. Looks like we have a handful of people that have checked in and are now attendees. So if everybody's ready, we'll go ahead and get started. How's that sound, guys?
Sounds great. And also, there's directions I can repeat after you as well. We'll see. We'll just keep an eye on how many people come in. But go ahead. Sorry.
Deal. That sounds like a good plan, Joe. Okay. Just want to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar, Dollars and Cents, the Economics of Land Development Patterns. This is our only webinar in the Forum on the Future series that we're conducting this week for the general plan update, and just wanted to give a quick background. Today we're going to be delving into how the built environment affects local government financing. As we're updating our general plan and we're looking to the next 10 years worth of development or so, master planning the city's next cycle of growth and development, it's important for us to consider those development patterns and what they may mean for our fiscal resiliency or sustainability. The city has a long history of having a deep value for fiscal responsibility, and we've always tried to maintain reasonable fiscal prudence. Well, what we do with regard to our land development patterns can have a pretty severe consequence, either for our benefit or detriment. So, Lori, maybe as our admin deputy city manager, you oversee our finance department. Maybe you could give us a few words on why this might matter from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it's so important, and people wonder, well, what does dollars and cents have to do with the planning of the built environment of the city? And the answer really lies in what cities are designed to do, and that's to provide an extra layer of services, right? Cities were formed on top of counties to provide enhanced parks, better streets, recreation, things for seniors, activities for people, enhanced public safety. All of that is driven by the amount of money that's available to provide those services. So as we think about how we build out the environment, the fiscal impact is so important because it comes right back down to what we can see in our neighborhoods in terms of those services that we value, our trees, all the different things that make a community, they're all a function of the resources we have available. And so that's why we need to connect the dots between the built environment, the plans we make, and the amount of revenue that it generates back to the city. So with that, I think we're ready to have you jump in, Joe, and share with us the dollars and cents here.
Great. Well, first, good morning, everyone. And I apologize that I'm not there. I think we all know the circumstances that we're all under in this virtual world these days. But this, on a positive side, this video, this webinar will be videotaped. So whatever you see will be, it's yours 24/7. It'll be part of your process, and that you can share this with neighbors and friends as well. Before I start sharing my screen, a couple of field rules. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, as they come up, there's a little button that should be on your screens at home or wherever you're viewing this that you can click the questions tab and leave a question there, and we'll come back to it at the end of the presentation, or you can leave it. Some folks sometimes leave it in the chat section, but we recommend the question section. So with that, let me get going here, and let's see, hopefully get my screen going. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Sweet.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to go through about a 45-minute to an hour presentation talking about the details of your economics as well as why it matters. The way that I present is sort of a story method of the why behind it, but also graphic presentation of the visualization is very much part of what our role is, and why the planning for your community going forward, why to think of the economic development patterns of different land use patterns. So before I start that, I oftentimes talk to folks about the way that I look at cities as a form of DNA, that my community of Asheville or your community of Rancho Cucamonga has a history and a sort of DNA in it, much in the way that I have a DNA. And this is how I started my life here as a 3-month-old, and this is my trajectory to be my grandfather, whether I like it or not. There's not a lot I can do to change that pattern to be my grandfather, or more importantly, the pattern of me to become my father. So I know that there's a couple genetic issues that I have. I'm genetically Italian, can't really change that. We also have a genetic predisposition to heart disease in my family. So I know that there are markers and indicators going forward that I have to plan for. So for me, the planning process is all about thinking of how you see these indicators that are baked within you, that go back to decisions that were made maybe decades ago, but also learn from other places and their heart attacks or their issues and how you can plan for it. So I have to exercise more and eat better in order to avoid a 7 bypass heart surgery, let's say, because that's within my family history. So as we talk about Rancho Cucamonga going forward, I'm bringing you evidence, much in the way that my doctor brings me my cholesterol count. And just these are forms of looking at it as an MRI going forward. How do you make decisions? So this is the lesson I want to leave up front. I'm going to give you a lot of information, but if there's one thing that you can take away is think about models of where you're going in the future. So our firm was started in Asheville, North Carolina, which is a city of 90,000 people in Western North Carolina. It was actually the second largest city in North Carolina at one point in time. But I worked with a real estate development company that was looking at these buildings that basically everybody just walked away from. And we had this attitude that we're not urban, we're not a city anymore, we're just this rural Western North Carolina town. And anytime somebody tried to do something to fix these buildings or try to do any kind of rehab, it was met with great force in the community that won't work here, that we're not urban anymore. And it's interesting to me, trained in city planning and real estate development, that we would look at cities this way with these kind of subjective biases without understanding what these are in the span of human civilization. So if we take the long haul, we've had cities for tens of thousands of years built a certain way. It's only in this recent last 100 years that we've kind of thought of them differently, and to great error, actually. So the company that I worked with was called Public Interest Projects. It was a for-profit real estate development company. We actually, fixed buildings and stuff. Julian Price on the upper left there inherited a lot of money, about $15 million he put into this real estate development company, and we fixed buildings and started businesses. So the first vegetarian restaurant was in town. We basically try to find a way to make the buildings active, but also the street. So this is one of our buildings before and after. And it was interesting when we did this building. I'll just go back again. This is it before, same building. We just took the screen off and took this old hotel and turned it into apartments. The banks told us this would never work. This is 400 to 500 square foot apartments. Every community I go to, I ask people in the audience who would live in a 400 to 500 square foot apartment. Usually like one person raises their hand. And then if I just change the question and say who has lived in a 400 to 500 square foot apartment, usually 95% of the hands go up. So rather than see ourselves as what we needed in our lives, we saw it as, what does our community need? And is there an opportunity for 400 to 500 square foot apartments for somebody that's new to town, they want to downsize, they're recently divorced, whatever, it doesn't matter. This is society, and we have to think of that right fit in the community. And this is how downtown survived for tens of thousands of years. But really what it pointed out, and a lot of our work pointed out, is that there's a paucity of looking at data on how cities work, that there's lots of conversations that we have about our cities and our places, and they're very emotionally driven. But there's a lack of putting a front forward conversation about data. So this is the value of our downtown. So if we're a $15 million investor in a portfolio called our downtown was worth $100 million in the 1990s. Just by fixing up buildings. Asheville didn't get a new building in the downtown until 2008. So this is the value that was like sitting there that we weren't capitalizing on. So just by fixing buildings and untapping those upper stories, we essentially harvested $400 million of new value. Now, to show you that it wasn't all love and roses in Asheville, it was actually the city that took the leadership on this and started fixing the sidewalks and investing in downtown, that brought investors like a public interest project in to actually do the private sector side. So, but for the city not taking leadership, these developers would have never done anything to fix those buildings, and builders and whomever. These are actual campaign ads from the 1990s. I love these. So this is this guy, Chris Peterson. Here he is complaining about $26 million of investment that the city put in for parking garages and streetscape projects. So basically the city was priming the pump by building that urban environment, laying the field, if you will, for that development to come in, and it came in. So let's just do some math real quick, because $26 million is a lot of money. I get why Chris would complain about this. But $26 million, if you invest $26 million on a $100 million asset and it grows to 500, is investing 26 and yielding 430 million of new private investment. Is that a good return on investment? I would say yes. You know, it's an incredible return on investment. It's basically a $430 million return. Now, putting this in front of Chris isn't going to stop him. I mean, he's got websites now with fire and brimstone. I love that he misspelled charlatans. It's kind of awesome. This is my mayor, and I asked the mayor, I said, is that a liquor drink? And she goes, it should be. You know, it's just, he's got his opinions. I appreciate that. Opinions are great, but he's not entitled to the facts of what's going on inside the economics of our city. Now, what I've kind of realized here in Asheville, and actually in a lot of communities, is we've kind of lost the civic sense of understanding the math behind cities. This is a kid's book that I found in a garage sale in Florida. And you know, I'm a planner, so I thought it was a planning book, but it's the city, the town, and the country. So there's a city, the town, and the country. This is the teacher's guide. So in this book from 1959, it's a third grade textbook on civics. So in kindergarten, you learn about your house. First grade, the school. Second grade, you learn about your neighborhood. Third grade, you learn about regional planning and how it all fits. So do we even use this book anymore? I mean, what I've seen is this is a loss of civic understanding of what cities are and how they function, or even your county as well. This is in the teacher's guide. It says this: while patterns vary from state to state, counties are responsible for education, library, health, welfare, etc. In studying the functions performed by your county, you will no doubt find there's a duplication of services and overlapping jurisdictions and a lack of coordination between the county and the local communities within it. Now, every community I go to, our county, I had one of our county commissioners actually tell me they were making decisions for the county and not the city. And I said during the public comment, I was like, last time I checked, I'm still a county taxpayer. You know, it's like we've got this divorced connection between who we are as taxpayers inside San Bernardino County, or in my case, Buncombe County, and how it operates in our community. But this is one of the lesson plans. So here's what's going on. You see, it's painfully white. I'll say that. It's from the 1950s. It's also misogynistic. The girls are shoved out in the hallway for some reason. But if you read this, it says a new factory gets built. There's even more kids that go to school. And so you ask your third graders in blue right here, give 4 good reasons for building a new school. So your third graders talk about community need, equity. Everybody should have a desk, right? Everybody should be in the classroom. Maybe get another teacher, split the class in 2. That's called infrastructure, right? There's needs in the community that you have to get. On the right-hand side of the page, you read about Mr. Canfield, who lived next door to the Allens, and he said, our taxes are too high now. If we build a new school, we'll need more teachers and everything else, then we'll still have to pay higher taxes. That is indeed true. So when you ask for stuff and you buy stuff, you have to pay for it. And so you ask your third graders, why would some people have to pay higher taxes, and why are some people against paying higher taxes? You know, it's completely natural to be against paying higher taxes. There's actually a great old colonial barb that I like to use, which is don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax the fellow behind the tree. Like, we're a country of tax evaders. I mean, heck, we threw tea into the harbor because we didn't want to pay taxes on it. So I get it, but there's a cost to society that we have to run the numbers on, and there's some great community need that is worthwhile to pursue as a community. But the key thing in this book is this statement here. Remember too that many children, whether urban and rural and regardless of region, are tragically limited in their knowledge of their world, and their world's largely the space in which they live and operate. So it's this tragic limitation of really understanding how our cities operate is basically how we make most of our decisions. And that I see that the city In my case, my city's a finite boundary of land. Well, basically, so is yours. So those acres are all that drive the city. So it's just basically a really big real estate development project that has to be managed in a fiscally prudent way, that we have to understand the costs of all of our infrastructure and how our growth patterns cover those costs or don't, depending on how the land use is patterned. So we have to be conscious of the financial consequences of the decisions we make. Now, why it matters for all of us at a civic level is that we're all in it as shareholders. Actually, if you look at the word incorporate in the Oxford American Dictionary, it says that to incorporate means to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. So, my city of Asheville is a really big real estate development corporation that's much larger than public interest projects. And it's not just your city. Your city's bigger than us as well. It's your county, it's your state's incorporated, our country's incorporated. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert show in 2016. The United States is the largest corporation in the world. And I'm such a nerd. I went and pulled the actual US code. There it is. You can look it up. We are listed as a federal corporation. It doesn't say that we're a capitalistic corporation, but we're essentially an incorporated system of governance. So my city at $14 billion of value is 6 times the value of Ted Turner. So, does Ted Turner wake up every day and just only make his decisions based off Facebook? Of course not. He's looking at data. So I advocate that we need to do the same thing at home. We need to look at our farm of our city and how it operates, or what's productive and what's not. And when you talk to farmers always talk in economic terms. What's the crop yield per acre, the water per acre, all of that, the labor per acre. So let's do the same with one of our buildings that we rehab. So this is the streetscape project that the city invested in. So thank you, City of Asheville, for the garbage can, the bike rack, 2 benches, and a street tree. They built this sidewalk and all of the improvements on the sidewalk. So Chris actually, he called it a subsidy. And in a way, he's right. We didn't pay for it, but the entire world can walk on it. But let's just go ahead and call it a subsidy to our building. We put in retail, office, and residential right here. And basically the 6-story building. It was an old JCPenney's department store that we renovated. We took the taxable value from 300,000 to 11 million. So that means that the community now gets 3,500% more taxes off our investment. So that's go out and buy 3,500% more garbage cans. We don't care. It's how do we grow our wealth in our community so that they can have more potency on the same infrastructure. And the way that people took it, it was really interesting to hear people's rebuttals to this. They're like, well, Joe, that's $11 million. We've got this Walmart over here at 20 million. It's like, okay, fair enough. But it took 34 acres of my corporation to make that happen versus 0.2 acres of our building downtown. When you look at the taxes per acre, this is the tax yield per acre on our building versus theirs. So we're more productive at about 100 times more production of property taxes versus them, double the retail sales. Who would have thought that a furniture store, a tattoo parlor, and a beauty salon are actually that productive, but they are. Got residents, they don't. And then jobs, we've got more jobs. This is a really simple way of breaking things down to understand things in an apples to apples way. And again, back to the crop analogy, just as a joke, I was presenting this in Colorado, and this works in your community as well. If you had an acre of land to grow something, what are you going to grow? The marijuana or the wheat? You're gonna grow the cash crop. So we understand this with crops, just understand it with buildings. And sometimes people react to this presentation and they're like, well, Joe, you just have a problem with Walmart. You hate Walmart. And let's take a huge step out and deal with that real quickly. I presented at the International Association of Tax Assessing Officers Conference, which is probably one of the squarest conferences I've ever presented. Bunch of tax assessors. It makes a planning conference feel like Burning Man. But this guy got up and was the keynote speaker at the assessors conference, and he presented spreadsheet after spreadsheet on how cheap his buildings are. And I was blown away. I was like, this is amazing. Think about this. You've got 3,000 assessors in one room, and you're proving how cheap your buildings are. So he's getting all of his property taxes lowered in one meeting. That's efficient. Now, as a citizen, I was having a coronary because I was like, how is he getting away with this, and why do the assessors not care? Well, the assessors, think of their world. They just have to find value. They can't guess what the future value is. They can only figure out what the market value is. So they don't really care about what the property could be. So I went up to the microphone And I asked him, I said, Mr. Terrell, what's the useful life of one of your buildings? And he honestly shot back 15, maybe 20 years. We designed the building on a depreciable basis to depreciate it as fast as possible. We'll build another building and depreciate it down again. We don't care about the buildings, they're throwaway. So that's it from the mouth of babes. Their investment in your community is 15, 20 years, which is the life cycle of a cat. And that's it. That's all you get out of that building. And that's that building typology. So there's something really scary in all of this math here, which is there's a perverse incentive to build junk in your community. If you tax me on value, there's an incentive for me to not give you value. So that's the really simple math behind all of this stuff. And really what we're doing is just doing simple apples to apples understanding of the mathematics of productivity, which is not unknown to us as citizens. So, you know, when we talk about cars, could you imagine if I was like, hey, my Ford F-150 gets 650 miles per tank. You know, it's the best vehicle on here. You'd laugh at me and you're like, Joe, that's stupid. All tanks are different sizes. We go by the mile per gallon, not mile per tank. And when we say miles per gallon, the numbers change and we shall be driving BMW Acetas. So this is the simple math that we're doing for your land productivity, is basically seeing it as what it is, which is a limited resource, and seeing it as an efficiency level to make things apples to apples so we understand the economics of development. We've done this all across the country, numerous cities in California, and I just have to close my window real quick because my neighbor is weed eating his yard. I'll be right back. Hopefully that isn't too disturbing. But we've done it all across the country. And for every dollar of county taxes somebody out in the county is paying to the county per acre, their brother and sister in the city is paying about 5 times that. Here's the Walmart, here's the mall. This is a 2-story building, a 3-story building, and a 6-story building. So we're not really bringing skyscrapers in here. This is all below the high-rise code. But you see, even with the 2- and 3-story building, it's not a proportional jump above the strip development. It's an exponential jump by adding stories. So, and there's a place for that. This isn't to do this everywhere. You should have a downtown and just keep things in balance. So back to the counties. This is my county of Buncombe County. This is the way people typically look at real estate. So this is a map of valuation across my county. I have non-taxable in gray. This is a big park. This is Mount Mitchell, and this is Mount Pisgah. These are the 2 tallest mountains east of the Mississippi. They're big parks. So they're non-taxable. So just to be crude about it, they don't pay taxes. I don't care about it. I've got low value in green, high value in purple. So this is all low value. This is high value. This is the Biltmore Estate, which is America's largest house. That one house is worth $100 million, but it's really not fair to look at it that way because it's also a 180,000 square foot house on 8,000 acres of land. So it's like the biggest gas tank. So rather than total value, let's change the map to value per acre to see productivity, and we see a completely different map. But why stop here? Let's see it in 3D. So now here we're able to see the spatial relationship between the potency of our downtown. Now we don't have our buildings aren't that tall, but you can see the potency of our downtown. I don't even have to label the map compared to our downtown, or our neighbor, our little sister over here at Black Mountain. And we can see its downtown. So you can see geographically, we can see what's going on. We can see spatially what's going on with our suburban area that's spreading out. That it's growing, but it's not really growing the value and potency of what we've got in our core area of our city. So we need to understand the spatial relationship of valuation and development patterns and what's happening with your buildings. And I know this joke only works for people over the age of 35, but still. Anyway, one of the immediate reactions is, Joe, you just want to see big buildings everywhere. And again, I want to underscore that point, that I want you to understand your potency and then think about your building design's relationship to that. So I'll give you an example. In West Palm Beach, Florida, Palm Beach County, you pretty clearly see where the ocean is, but we can also see what's going on in downtown West Palm Beach right here with its little purple mountain that's coming off right here. So these are just 2 buildings in downtown West Palm Beach. This is a 3-story building on Main Street, and this is a skyscraper a couple blocks away. And you can actually see that this building is more potent than that building. So this is 10.5 million an acre. This is 9.3 million. And that's the math. So don't let your eyes deceive you. A tall building doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's potent. And there's a lot of it has to do with the density of the building on the site and its architecture. That's 10.5 million. Let's show you something even smaller. This is in Alexandria, Virginia. This little house right here, this little is it's a 7 foot wide by 36 foot wide lot. And it's sandwiched between these two buildings. It's pulling 65 million an acre. It's actually narrower than a smart car. The other reaction we get from folks is, my community doesn't want density. The densities that, we don't want to be dense and all this stuff. So we did a project in Gwinnett County, Georgia, which is outside of Atlanta. The county seat there is Lawrenceville. Lawrenceville is, I have to be honest with you, I'd never heard of Lawrenceville. When I went to the community, they literally, and this is working in the South, sometimes they offer strange cultural controls on their presentations, but they basically told me I wasn't allowed to say 4 words in their community. These were ugly words in their community. I couldn't say the word urban, city, town, or municipal. And our client, which is the Chamber of Commerce, was like, Joe, look, these are dirty words in our community, and if you say them, it's going to incite people. We don't want you to use these words. And I was like, fine. I mean, it's weird to put that control on, but I mean, what am I going to say about my company, that we're just like 3 or something? But whatever. I respected their opinions. Now we're doing their math. Gwinnett County is outside of the belt line of Atlanta. There are 812,000 people in Gwinnett County. And I called up my client and I was like, Kelly, y'all are 812,000 people. She goes, yeah, but honey, look, we're like 460 square miles. We're huge. Okay. I don't know what that means, but I can do some math. So we divided their population by their acres, or by square miles to get their density. So their community density was about 1,900 people per square mile. And that's what they are. However, the piece of Atlanta in DeKalb is more dense. So I get it. But we had all this other data, and I was presenting to the community. I said, look, I'm just going to show you this stuff. These are other places that we have. What's in Mecklenburg County, North Carolina? And the audience was stunned. And somebody goes, Charlotte? And I was like, yeah, they're less dense than you by 200 people per square mile, and they produced a Charlotte. Davidson, Tennessee is home to Nashville, and they're 600 people less dense per square mile than you. How is it that these 2 places have a professional football team? I never heard of Lawrenceville. It's not like we have the Lawrenceville Chargers or something. This is Austin, Texas. You're double the density of them. Raleigh, Asheville, and this is Orange County, North Carolina. This is home to Chapel Hill. This is what rural looks like. I don't know what y'all are. And when we did their model, you can see it's kind of all yellow across the whole thing. And as Josh McCarty, our analyst, was doing it, by the way, this is the last farm in the entire county right here. So it's pretty much a similar singular pattern of development across the whole thing. And he turned it on its side so we could see its profile, and it looks like a 1970s shag carpet. It's the same thing across the whole entire model. Now, the reason why I was freaked out about it is that this is what we typically see. So this is Orange County, North Carolina. I can see where the rural area is, and I can see where the community is. I can also see where Chapel Hill's downtown is, Carborough's downtown, and Hillsborough's downtown, and this is some new urbanism over here. I can see the patterns of development writ across this model in an economic pattern. This is what they got. So whatever they said they were, this is the pattern that they chose. So by saying no to stuff, you're actually saying yes to another form of development. And the most potent building that they got was built by their great grandparents in 1920, right there. That's it. That's the most potent. That's the top of their model at about, let's call it $8 million an acre of value. So putting them up against the other samples, this is where they are against everybody else's top of their model. So that's a choice they made. That's the value that they get. It's a very low potency form of development. You know, one of the things in their defense, it's not like this part of the United States was Boston or something like that, where they could do these, you know, in Boston, this is kind of normal to do townhouses. This is a typology that was zoned out of existence in a lot of cities. But when you look at it, is it unappealing? I mean, actually, this townhouse in Lewisburg Square right there, that one's pulling $161 million an acre of value right there at, what is that, 4.5 stories, you know? And so is that unlivable? It's highly, highly potent. Now remember, Gwinnett County tops out at 8 million an acre. So just to put the 3 counties at the same scale and look at their profiles, we call this the economic heart monitor, and we pulse them out. This is how they pulse out. So we've got a peak value of 192 million in Gwinnett County, or sorry, Davidson County, which is Nashville. Austin, which is less dense, is actually more potent, and Lawrenceville is flatlining at 8. And so when I was talking to the community, I said, look, y'all, you have all the same horizontal infrastructure is this stuff. In this stuff, you have no vertical stuff. And I asked them, I said, so you're, you know, 40 years into this development pattern, are you guys broke yet? And one of the elected officials started shaking her head, yes. And she's like, yeah, we're broke. And I was like, well, how'd that happen? You know, again, these are development patterns that may feel good, like eating pizza for me feels good. I love pizza. I'm just going to go ahead and say that. But I also know the economic consequences or the heart consequences to me if I have a continuous diet of pizza. So the same is true of your development patterns. We need to understand what the consequences and costs of that are going forward. So that's a lot of preamble. I just wanted to get into some examples before we talk into Rancho Cucamonga. So coming from North Carolina, the first thing that we have to do is kind of break through your tax system. The California tax system is complicated, but it's not that complicated. It's more complex than complicated. But here's our system is really simple. We have a market value. You get a taxable reduction to a tax value. Everybody gets the same taxable reduction in our state. We don't have a Prop 13 or any kind of controls that way. And then you have your tax rate on top of that to get your tax bill. It's a straight line system. For y'all, you have a taxable value, you get homestead exemptions and other exemptions. There's Prop 58 that you can have if you inheritance valuation pass-throughs, all sorts of stuff to get a net taxable value. And then you're constricted to 1% ad valorem limits on your special assessment to get your tax rate. That's this Prop 13 and other propositions that kind of restrict that to get your tax bill from there. Commercial and residential is basically capped at the same. So the same $600,000 is going to bring the same tax bill if you're commercial or residential. Your city's portion is a portion of that tax that comes back to your community. So for that $6,000 of taxes, your city's only getting about $300 of it. The majority of that is going up to the county and another into the school systems and stuff like that. So this is what your city council is dealing with, is very limited trickle back of property taxes that come back from a property tax of $600,000 value. So your land, just to start, San Bernardino is a massive county. A big chunk of it is just mostly desert. So we just kind of cut it off. One is just so we could deal with the data inside the parcels, but really it's how you kind of function too. So geographically speaking, there's a whole section of your county that is just the abyss. So we just focused on this piece, and Rancho Cucamonga is kind of the top end of it. It goes all the way east to Redlands, with Ontario to the west of you, and Fontana and San Bernardino to the east of you. This is the total valuation map. So this is the miles per tank version with, and you can see the big parcels along the highway really start to pop up. But again, miles per tank versus value per acre, completely different model. And you can start to see the heat shift in it. This is it in 3D, where you can see what pops up. Now, right away, you can see a little purple mountain over in Redlands because they have a pretty compact and cohesive downtown, or what's left of it. They did bomb their downtown out a little bit. But you can see the resulting mountain of evidence there. And we're not talking big buildings over there in Redlands. But what you all have on the western side of the county is you can see how your plateau or your base level is a lot higher than Redlands base level. So Redlands may have a peak, they've got their base around the peak. Y'all are all base with no peak, which shows to me a lack of a concentrated downtown. You're seeing a lot of heat over here, and a lot of that's probably commute patterns of folks traveling westward into the Los Angeles metro area and the higher prices of housing down around Riverside County. Here's your city total value. Again, you can see all what the mirage of heat on the south end of your city. This is the value per acre. And you see how those large parcels, they're very valuable in total, but they're also massive tracts of land that really aren't that productive on an apples to apples standpoint, although they are a lot of jobs. So here's your city in 3D. We pulled out the Victoria Gardens area because we know that of your plans in working with this to grow it up or to have kind of an infill pattern of building in a core area, and this could be a possible core, but this is your total value per acre, just as a sample. So it's not really that potent, although it's growing into a potency. Your sample area is about 40% non-taxable. When you throw in the rest of the county, that really waters down because most of the desert is non-taxable. But within the developed area, this was just a check, so you have a comp of the area. But what's probably more important for you all is just looking at your city. Your city is about 37% non-taxable. This is, I want to say it's kind of average. You're about what Asheville is, but we have a college in our city that in a pretty major hospital that takes down a lot of non-taxable. For y'all, it's mostly the open space lands up toward the mountain on the north side, and then there's this trench canal that comes through. But then you can see the smattering of parks and places around. And again, this is a value statement of your community. It's just something to keep an eye on. When you get into the Victoria Gardens area, about 13% is non-taxable. Just as a downtown comparison, our downtown is 44% non-taxable. So we have city buildings, county buildings, and stuff like that in our downtown area. And that's actually on the high side. Usually a downtown's somewhere around 30 to 35%. Because we had the model of Riverside, we went ahead and threw that in so you can see that as a comp, and you can see those patterns again. We don't see another downtown until you get into Riverside, and where they're downtown, you can see it popping up. Corona, you can see one, and then also Temecula is doing a good job at building up a downtown in their area. And I'll come back to Temecula in a little bit, but let's just get focused back on y'all. So as a piece of your county subset, you're about 9% footprint of that area. From a footprint standpoint, you're producing 15% of the value to the county. So as a potency, you're about a 1 to 2 ratio of productivity for the county as county taxpayers in Rancho Cucamonga. For your city part, the Victoria Gardens is about let's call it a 3% footprint. It's producing less than its footprint and value. So it's about a 1 to 1 ratio, a little bit less than 1 to 1. I'll come back to why this is important in a bit, but that's not great, let's just say. Looking at the side view of your city, and we kind of called out the canal because it makes a pretty good divot through your community and profile. So this is looking northward. Here's Victoria Gardens. So it really isn't sticking out that much higher than anything else in your community. We're seeing a lot of the same telltale signs of the plateau that you have that we saw in Gwinnett County here. There's really nothing that's formulating itself into a mountain yet in the community, which is actually an opportunity as you go forward in your community plan. This isn't to say that Victoria Gardens is your downtown, but there's opportunities for it throughout your community. And it doesn't have to be just one. There could be other areas in sub-downtowns. But back to the land analysis. One of the other metrics that we always do in every community is just get rid of the buildings and look at the land value per acre, because that gives us some good indication about what's going on in the dirt, and it's more stable, because the buildings, somebody could do a very valuable building, somebody could do a very poorly valued building, or there's also Prop 13, but your dirt should be more stabilized. This is the pattern that we see in your county, and then again, zooming into the city. There's weird things in here that just to be aware of, that's kind of commonplace. You can see that the out parcels tend to be higher value than the larger tracts of land. So we have low value in light pink, heavy purple is high value. And then you also see the patterns happening because of Prop 13. So the neighborhoods that are newer are transacting at a higher rate, so therefore they have a higher value than, let's say, the neighborhoods that are older and have that benefit of the Prop 13 suppression. So their value doesn't change until there's a transaction. And you can see that in the dirt is incredibly low value at around $200,000 an acre for the dirt versus where recent transactions have happened. So there's actually another incentive for you all to have more recent transactions, because it resets the clock financially for you all in your valuation. But it's very much a pattern that we see across this whole area. So it's not inconsistent with what we see in Redlands. And these are fairly nerdy maps, I know, but we just went ahead and made these for you so you could see yourself within the context, your city, and then zooming in. And again, you can see some areas, the out parcels popping up really high compared to their neighbors around it there. Incidentally, that's a bias baked inside the standards of the assessment methodology, where smaller parcels are valued higher than bigger parcels. I don't know why they do that. It makes no economic sense. It's not fair. It's not equitable, but it's a standard of practice inside assessment. And just for the sake of it, we kind of, took out the lawnmower and mowed down some properties. So you can see just at the northern suburbs, the heavy contrast going from west to east, and all of that is temporal. It's all based on time and when the patterns are. That's pretty hidden when you see the whole model this way. But again, we'll have these images for you so you could see it as a cross section down Route 66. And again, here's the Victoria Gardens model. One of the other analyses that we ran for you all is where the dirt is worth more than the buildings on top of it. And this is showing the parcels. We always run these analyses. This helps you understand speculation or land waste or opportunity. So here's a parcel here. I mean, you could drive by, there's a building there, but basically the dirt here in this parcel is worth more than the building. In fact, it's worth 516 times more than the building on a ratio analysis. So these are areas, as you look around your community, look for areas in opportunity to revitalize this. That right now, this is not a good financial situation at a community level. You're getting far less taxation out of it than what the building could produce. So just be aware of that. We also ran your sales tax analysis. This is important for your community because what you don't make in property tax, you want to hopefully get in sales tax. And we geospatially ran that model across. Now we're forced by your state law, state standards, we can't show individual businesses, but we can show districts. But this is your property taxes done by district of potency. And you can see you have a high value cluster over here from a valuation of dirt or property value. And then this is the sales tax. So when you combine the two of those together, you're starting to see some hot sales tax districts. And there's some other stuff sprinkled around in the neighborhoods that are pretty potent. That's good neighborhood retail. The neighborhood strip mall or coffee shop, or you all have some really good dim sum areas as well. But anyway, stacking one on top of the other, you can start to see what you're getting in property tax. You might be lagging, but you're getting an incredible amount of retail tax out of those areas. Again, just view this like another CAT scan and seeing the potency to help you make decisions. So jobs, you send a lot of jobs out of your community, but you import a lot of folks in your community as well for this area of San Bernardino. And you basically recirculate the same amount of citizens in the area as well. When you get into the city, basically you could see this as you have a lot of employment or you have a paucity of housing, but you're basically exporting you're importing you're importing more people than you're exporting, and you only have about 11,000 people inside Rancho that work inside Rancho. So basically, you're importing workers and exporting workers, and only have about 11,000 jobs inside your community that are employed by people in your community. So back through the building typologies, to drill down into the why in all of this, and we always start with the boxes. Your Rancho Walmart is somewhere about 1.6 million, and I'll keep that on here as a control subject in the lower left here. But here's how your malls stack up. They're about, let's say up to about double a Walmart in potency. So for as vast and as big as these buildings are, their potency only doubles to a Walmart. Carousel Mall over in San Bernardino is $0 right now. So it's really not doing well. When you get to from 1.5 to 3 million, and now we step into the Arte building, to Ontario Square and Metro 102. Now we're at 6 million, 7.5 million, 14 million, which is quite impressive. So many more times than the Walmart at 1.6 million. When you get into some Main Street examples over in Fontana or Upland, Ontario, and Redlands, we go from 5 million to 12 million to 14 million to 21 million. Now remember, this little guy right here, this Wilson's Jewelers, $21 million an acre of value versus it says basically double Metro 102 from a potency standpoint for just a 2-story building. When we go down to Temecula, we see a completely different alternative in these guys. And I'm going to dwell on this for a second because this is an interesting strategy that they did here. Basically, they got rid of parking for these buildings and dealt with parking as a facility for management. The same way that we deal with streets and on-street parking as a public commodity, they basically do the same thing for the off-street parking, which allows more density. But then we get from 19 million to 28 million. So you're getting a higher tax potency on the same. These are only like 4-story buildings here, or 3-story buildings. So you're getting high potency that a 3-story building is more potent than a 4-story building. We actually did a project like this here in Asheville. It's a public-private development. So I'll just walk through the mechanics of this because this is what they did at a larger scale in Temecula. So we had a parcel of land that we built a hotel and housing. Here's the hotel, this is the housing. And basically we had the surface parking lot and a hot dog stand right here. And we kept on getting approached by hotel developers that wanted to buy our land, their surface parking lot. And my boss was like, no, we'll this isn't great to have a surface parking lot, but we know the parking demand. And if we just sold this to you, this whole neighborhood would lose that parking ability. So let's just work together and bring the city into this. So the city bonded out to do the parking garage, and then we wrapped a hotel, housing, and eventually this building here is going to be, I call it the stirrup building. It's like an upside down U right here. That's another mixed use project that'll eventually get there, but this part is built now. These are complex deals. It wasn't easy to get through the system, and it was kind of funny to see the condo documents that the city put together. It was like a 50-page document, and I just made this really dumb cartoon to kind of explain it. But basically, here's the city's fee simple land. They have an easement under us. We have fee simple here, air rights here over the top, and then fee simple back here with there's an access agreement that goes through our property to the garage. And then here's the hotel sitting on top of the whole thing. So basically we're wrapping taxes all around a non-taxable entity. But that parking, folks that live in the housing and come to the hotel have to pay to park in that facility. So it's actually producing revenue for our city, but also taxes for our city. And then we're using the bonding capacity of the city to get a less expensive construction garage, and it's being treated as a public commodity. So here it is. It's the housing just got built on the backside. Here's the hotel with the pool on top of the parking deck. But because it was our land, we knew what we paid in taxes in 2008, and here it is 10 years later and what it's paying in taxes. So from my community standpoint, we grew the coffers of our community about 3,000% in taxes. In Temecula, they're doing the same thing, that basically the city built the parking structure and uses those parking credits so that they can get higher density development around it. And it's a trade-off, but they're able to get higher revenue the same way we are here. So in our community, that's what we're doing, is trying to grow the community taxes. I was showing this to my boss and he's like, Joe, you like making graphics. Why don't you make it into a graphic? And I was like, fine, here's 11,500 next to 300,000. So this is how we're growing our wealth. Now, here's the crazy thing. We didn't need to do this. We could have just sold the land to the hotel developer and walked, but we wanted to see our community wealth grow. And you know, we could have kept our money and done nothing. We could have kept it as a surface parking lot and paid low taxes. But if we had $1 in downtown development, it essentially doubled in value in Asheville. So our downtown's hot right now. We could have doubled our money doing that in valuation by just speculating. Or we could have put our money in Vanguard or NASDAQ. But what did our community get out of it? What was my community's gain in taxes on this property? Well, that's up over here. Actually, it keeps going. So this is what our community saw is a return on that valuation through tax returns, basically. So that's why we did this. And again, back to Temecula, that's why they have that density. So this is in a loft, which I've stayed at yours. And just to just show you your comparison to the Temecula building, this is pulling 7.6 million an acre. This is pulling 28 million an acre. And a lot of that's because this has no parking on site. It's real simple. And this has a tremendous field of parking that's basically watering down the value. So for all the potency you get out of having a taller building, it's actually being liquidated by all of that land that's being consumed for the parking. So there's a cost to parking. When we say we want more parking, just be sure you realize the check that you're writing for that, because there are economic consequences of that. And I can show you that in Victoria Park. If you centralize the parking and maybe built a deck or something, you can take the taxable value per acre from 4 million to 9 million. So here's what it looks like in 3D with the parking, and here's what it looks like without the parking, bumping up. So that's an opportunity. Just think of that as there's trade-offs to decisions as you go forward, and the economic consequences of having parking requirements in your zoning code. You're going to pay for it. So pay for it one way or another, but be aware of that transaction. So this is just a real simple pull of just some sample parcels, just as a bar chart so you can see where you're at. I'm not going to go through this whole thing. We'll print this out, but basically you can see the difference between commercial, residential, and mixed use. Here's your Walmart. Here's your malls in here. Here's your county single family and city single family. Your city single family is more potent than countywide. But when you get into multifamily, you go from about, let's call it 2.5 million an acre for city single family to about 7 million in Victoria Gardens for multifamily. So just because it's rental or a multifamily product doesn't mean that it's not valuable. When you get into mixed use buildings, you start to see it really blossom up and jump up, particularly for the multi-story stuff. And then this is the Wilson's Jewelers in Redlands right here to show you the potency of that. This is Rockin' Fondue in Redlands. It's killing it. Tiny little building. So basically, Leroy's Board Shop is that about that much footprint. You only need 2 acres of Leroy's to equal the 12-acre Virginia Dare Winery. So this is the footprint of Virginia Dare Winery. So basically, you need that many board shops to equal the winery. So think about the footprint difference. Or here's another way of looking at it. This is a house in Redlands, and that's its footprint compared to a house on Ridge Canyon Road. And this is its footprint. So basically you need just a smudge more of this house to equal that potency. So if you just look at the tax value, you're seeing a $1.4 million tax value house, but it's on 0.6 acres. This little guy here is only 400,000, but it's on like, what is that? 1/6 the land area. So just a big tax bill doesn't necessarily guarantee potency is what I'm saying here. So just be aware of that. And again, the Rancho Verde Village, 2 acres of that equals the 11-acre Villaggio, or if you only have that much of the building on the left, it equals this much of the building on the right. Arte, basically if you did 2/3 of the Arte, it would equal the entire Rancho Verde village. 3 acres would equal 11. And here's the rock and fondue. This is one of our favorites. Basically, you'd need that much of the rock and fondue to equal the McDonald's on the right. And go wander around Redlands. There's like some fun examples, like this weird little boot shop that's 7 feet wide. Basically, if you just had, what is that, 12 of these little boot repairs, it would equal the entire Bass Pro Shops in property tax productivity. So be aware of that, and also learn from Redlands. There's good things in Redlands. There's some bad things, but we've done the analysis there in 2017, and just to show them the potency, this one little block here on the south of State Street at Orange, they blew out a big section of their downtown, but what's left is actually pretty potent. This one little block right here, if you had 18 acres of it, it would equal the 120-acre Mountain Grove complex here in property and retail tax, combined productivity. So basically, all on that left there would equal what's on the right. So understand the potency. There's trade-offs. That's going to be more complex to do the thing on the left. It's going to require some more complex thinking, but the rewards on it are immense and immeasurable. And back to your land use, we have recommended to your city staff to dig a little deeper on planimetric data. Planimetric data is the title for basically having different, computers read satellite imagery and stuff like that to figure out your land uses. So these are all your roads, these are your buildings, and then this is your aerial. So you can see that, if we just leave it at buildings and roads, this looks like, oh, wow, look at all this open space. But really, it's not open space. A lot of that's just parking after parking after parking. You see how it spreads your buildings out, and you get that low walkability and other issues when you start to have those huge fields of parking. But just to show you a drill in the planimetric data, this is what it looks like. So we're able to like pull the parking out and see that it's about 5% surface parking. Obviously this is just one little area. We'd prefer to see it for the whole city, and I'll show you why. We did this in Indiana for Indianapolis, and this is to see the economic consequences of parking. So here's Indianapolis buildings. This is all of its parking, and countywide they're looking at a ratio of a 1-to-1 relationship of roads to parking. At a financial level, there's a different way of looking at consequences. So here's the parking, here's the buildings, and then here's the roads, and this is everything else: berms, buffers, backyards, parks, farms, whatever. When you look at that water's not taxable. When you look at the valuation, this is how it's valued. So you can see the stuff that we like, the berms, buffers, backyards, there's really not much value to that compared to the buildings. But here's what's crazy. They're picking up the tab on the roads at about $18 billion. The parking's only pulling $0.5 billion. This value is nowhere near the value of the roads. So let's drill in a little and unpack that. So here's Marion of Marion County. There she is. The average resident has about 1,200 square feet of buildings dedicated to her, about 2.5 parking spaces, and about 1,000 square feet of road. When this gets built, the assessor puts values on things, and then you're picking up the cost of the road. So this is the valuation. So the first thing to see here is check out the difference between a square foot of parking and a square foot of building. That parking is essentially 71 times less tax production than that building per square foot, which is, it is what it is. It's just asphalt's cheap. But the road's going to cost you $22 a square foot in front of the building and $22 a square foot in front of the parking. So just for fun, we're like, all right, if your cost is uniform, then this is called a subsidy, that this is paying less than that. It's not a subsidy in the way that we think about it, like we're having a public meeting and we're deciding to give a tax break to parking. Like, I don't know if y'all ever did that, but that's what's happening, right? So we're not conscious of this implicit subsidy that's happening inside the system. And here's the financial ramifications. If you took half the taxes, 50% of all the property taxes paid out of that $52, and 52% of the property taxes that come off of, or 50% of the property taxes that come off that 75 cents, how long will it take to pay off the $22 in each of these cases? So it takes 42 years for the building, and it takes 2,000 or 3,000 years for the parking. Well, guess what? Roads only last 50 years. So another way of putting it, you're essentially upside down financially with the parking, but it also will never cover the cost of that car moving around in your community. So you have to go rob from your building fund to pay for it. And as long as you're conscious of that and you can afford it, great. But most cities can't. And in fact, one of your neighbors, Lancaster, California, we did that math for them. Lancaster is 160,000 people. They're up and over the mountain from Los Angeles. Here's their city, and you can see where their downtown is. And again, Lancaster's downtown is not huge, but you can see how it's popping up. But what was crazy is they have 953 miles of roads, which is a lot of roads. They have enough roads in their portfolio to go from Los Angeles to Portland, build a 2-lane road that far, which is insane. But here's when they built all of their roads. So we stopped them in 2016, and you can see their great grandparents went on a little road building spree, and then everybody went to sleep until after World War II because they mostly grew around the Air Force Base. But 1953 looked particularly insane. So they added all those lane miles of roads. Well, guess what? That comes back to haunt their parents' generation in 1983. And when you're hit with that huge capital expense, what did your parents do? Well, they went out and built more roads. They added more land, which meant more roads. So this comes back with the second rebuild. Now, roads have to be rebuilt. Infrastructure has to constantly be rebuilt. It doesn't take care of itself. And that's the hidden, it's pretty scary, actually. Here it comes back. So this comes back with the new stuff is added on top of it. So we just said, okay, we're just going to cash flow you. You're not adding more people. We're just going to see how the stuff you own, its build rebuild cycle looks. And this is what it looks like. So notice that first wave was just kind of crazy. So just, blew it out. And every American city did this. We just went ahead and just added a lot of infrastructure after World War II because we didn't have to pay the bill for it. That bill came 50 years later. And so when we did that, we went ahead and added a second level of it because we just assumed this is how cities are built. We completely changed the way that we thought about things. Well, guess what? Now we're in the third generation and it's compounding on itself and getting bigger. And in the future, it's going to get even worse. So you can see how it's starting to stack on top of itself because it's not only your build pattern, it's that build and rebuild pattern. So simply put, Lancaster can afford 50% of their roads. That's it. So we made a really simple graphic to show them that this is a position that you're in. So when you hear from your city staff that they don't have money for stuff, it's not that they don't have money, it's this is being allocated in areas that are necessary to keep your city moving. So they're having a $25 million a year shortfall, basically, if you look at the cash flow of their roads. Now, this isn't like the roads are just exploding, but they're not getting the maintenance they need. They don't have the replacement reserve that they need. It's just basically been an attitude of how we deal with government that, in the future it'll work out or something. And that's not true for most American cities, that we are, and it's not unique to you that you're having these shortfalls. This is a pattern that we've all been through. So basically, y'all own enough roads to build a 2-lane road to Tucson. So just be aware of that. That's a lot of infrastructure. You have particularly wide streets. So it's not that you don't have, we're not saying don't build lanes. We're just saying you've got them all located in 1 or 2 spots. You need to stretch it out a little bit. So just to close, we want to give you some benchmark measurables of how to look at your community. So think of this like your nutritional fact sheet. If you're going to go out shopping and you're going to look at your cholesterol count or your sodium on your food, what are the metrics you should think about for your city? We had other cities that we can compare you against. So you have your total value is about 26 billion. Here's your population, your square miles, your average value per acre, and then the top of your model. The top of your model is your peak value per acre at about 9 million. To show you the other examples, Redlands has less than half your population. They're about reasonably close to your square miles, way lower value per acre, but a much higher top of their model. The same is true for Ontario. They have a closer value per acre, but a higher top model, and also Upland is close to you on a value per acre, but a higher top model. So you can actually go to those areas and see what's going on, or go down to your cousins down in Riverside, and you can see, I think Temecula, back to Temecula for a second, they're about 116,000 people, 30 square miles, half the value per acre on their average, but close to 3 times, let's say 2.5 times the peak of their model. And you can see where they're building in their downtown right here. Not necessarily just the old stuff, but the new stuff too. And again, you can see the peak of Riverside at 27 million, although they're a much larger population, and they have a lower average value than what you have. A lot of that, their average has been dragged down by all of this real estate down here on their southwest side. And so other samples that we had in our portfolio, just from a population standpoint, we thought it was fair and reasonable to bring Santa Rosa and Eugene, Oregon in. It's harder to use the financial numbers in Oregon because it's a different tax model system, but you can see in the model where their concentration in their downtown is, as well as Santa Rosa. And actually Eugene has two downtowns. There's the main downtown, actually three. There's the main downtown, there's the other side of the campus, which is like a little village downtown. And then they have this thing up here called Crescent Village at the north side of town, which is like a neighborhood, bars and restaurants. It's just a little mixed use core up here. But they're peaking at 23 million, same population as y'all, a little bit less actually. And Santa Rosa is pretty much the same population as you all, pretty close to the same area, a much higher average value and a very high peak value. So Santa Rosa is and this is like 2017 data, so it's probably better. So looking at back to your profile of your county area and seeing Redlands versus Rancho, we can see that peak value in their mountain at 25 million. You're peaking at 9 million. So what would it look like if you had a similar profile at the scale of your population? Where would those downtown areas be? Where would you focus that growth? And what could your peak really be based on your population? So basically there's an opportunity to grow up as you plan this future planning analysis. At a regional level, and I'm just going to blow through these real quick. It's you all know this is your regional model and how you operate culturally, that Los Angeles is the metro epicenter of this larger metropolis, and you can see it shaped out from a value standpoint, with Redlands being the tail out there. So this is your population densities. This is your job densities. So Redlands has actually got some core areas of jobs that are pretty potent. Esri, which is the software that we use, is actually based there. They have a lot of jobs in Redlands. And this is the population and jobs together. And again, from the valuation standpoint, see yourself in this context in the Inland Empire, and what can you be? And from the Inland Empire perspective, it really kind of is an amazing cluster. You're 4.6 million people over 27,000 square miles. This is you. This is your region out here. And what was kind of crazy to us is you're literally the same land area as Charleston and as South Carolina and the same population. You are a state. So the question to ask yourself is, as you look across your state, who's your Columbia or Greenville or Charleston? And that's an opportunity inside the Inland Empire to basically become that place. That there's a lot of spread across the system, and you have a lot of population, but it also means you have an opportunity. So inside the Inland Empire, like this land area here, you're looking at 3 million people in this population. We're doing the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and check this out. They're less population. They're 2 million people, but you can see the two prime downtowns clear as day here. Y'all have more population. Where's your core areas? So this is an opportunity for somebody somewhere, somehow in all of these areas to take on that opportunity, and there's going to be some wealth gained of it. So just for the sake of the provoking the idea, we just went ahead and just carved out downtown Minneapolis. And remember, they're less population than y'all, and there it is on side by side with your model. So this is the missing downtown that you had as an opportunity in the Inland Empire, but because of decisions made in the past and development patterns that happened, it just didn't get built. But that means it's an opportunity as well. So it's a tremendous, your region is peaking out at 25 and 28 million. This thing's pulling 241 million at a peak. Now, it'd be a little insane to say, yeah, just go out and make a downtown Minneapolis, but we're just doing this to kind of stimulate the conversation and idea about this, and to just show you that it's really not that big. And you can see what it takes to get there is a different kind of block structure, much smaller roads, and a finer grained network than what you have. You have these big mile blocks that are pretty large. But you can also see the opportunity. This little 600-acre thing is pulling $10.2 billion, which is about almost half the value of your entire city in this little 600-acre area. So on 4% of the land, it's worth 40% of your city, and that area could be anywhere. I would just drop it anywhere. Where are you going to make it happen, or even doing half that? Could you do a $5 billion downtown? So that's where you go back to the benchmark. Can we set a goal, kind of like I set my cholesterol goal or my body weight goal of where I need to be for my optimum health? I'm going to try to get there, but what would you be? So your ratio of this area, and again, it doesn't necessarily have to be just the Victoria Gardens area, it could be somewhere else, but just grabbing that as a sample, it's like a one-to-one relationship of value. To show you other models, this is Brevard, North Carolina, which is a little town of 8,000 people, and this is my city of Asheville, North Carolina. So inside both of these models, you can clearly see where the core area is. And the core in Brevard's pulling about a 1-to-6, 1-to-7 ratio of productivity. Our downtown is pulling a 1-to-6. So basically, we're living off the wealth created in our downtown. So we can afford more greenways, different parks, all that stuff, because we have a wealth center, which is our downtown. Brevard, the same deal. So where do you grow yours, and how do you grow yours? Is 1-to-6 the ratio? This is Durham and Chapel Hill. They're a 1-to-4 or a 1-to-8. We think 1-to-6 is fair, just conceptually. So taking you all at your 1-to-1 ratio or 1-to-0.6, you're pulling $400 million worth of value in that right now, where if it were a 1-to-6, you'd be $4 billion. So it's not the 10 billion of Minneapolis, but this is an opportunity of a place to shoot. But also, if you're shooting for that, you're actually building more wealth for your community, which means more revenues that you can pay for more things in your community. So, to close, if you're not measuring this stuff, you can't manage it. If you're not putting numbers out there to shoot for, it's more difficult to direct yourself. And be aware, you're a $26 billion city. So you're worth 6 Lakers. Your county it's insane. It's like 165 billion, which is like 38 Lakers. And I can tell you that Miss Jeannie Buss knows LeBron James towel bill. I can tell you the cups in our nightclub cost 5 cents a pop. We know this stuff because we're running a business that needs to understand the cash flow of how this stuff operates. And there's going to be sectors of your business that aren't producers, that are good for your social side of your community, but those need to be paid for too. So yes, I'm not going to say don't have parks. You need to have parks, but you need to have the quality of service elsewhere to be able to pay for that cost. So do your math on this stuff. So to close, going forward, as you go into this planning process, understand the economics of COVID as well. This is what's going on in COVID. Here it is adjusted for inflation. Your state is going to be in some severe problems at a local level because your cities depend on retail taxes. And what COVID has just taught us is that we're back to September 11th in retail taxes. It has rebounded a little bit, but be aware that your city staff has lost a tremendous amount of revenue because of the pandemic. Small stuff has a big impact. Think about the Redlands downtown and its impact and their ability to leverage that wealth. You have that opportunity. Find ways to thicken up your parcels and thin down your network. So this isn't to say you're not going to be building roads anywhere, but just think about reallocating that space, because you have a lot of lanes of roads. I'm not going to argue that. It's just that when you look at the thickness of your roads, it's kind of insane that they're that wide. I mean, you can land an airplane on some of these roads, but it's like Josh, our analyst, when he was driving around, there was literally a tractor trailer that was going the wrong way on one of those roads, and everybody just drove around it because there's so much space. And that's an indicator that you've got your roads are too wide, that everybody just deals with that. Utilize GIS tools. Again, you're in the base camp area for Esri. Y'all have it. Get more data, get better data, and take it to the next step. This is a map of Eugene where we did all of the revenues. We floated the whole city in a lake. This is all the revenues coming out of the ground, this is the cost of their development patterns. So if you know your revenues and your expenses, you can net one against the other to do a net ROI. So as you go forward in planning, you're going to be planning your revenue growth in areas, but you got to be conscious of costs too. This is the top of their model. And when you lift it up and look under the model, you can see the spread of subsidy across the whole thing. And just be aware that that's what's going on, and just be honest in your dialogue and discussion about this. Your core area is your core power. Shoot for 1 to 6. Find some area or a couple areas to grow your value and see these as opportunities. And you know, this it's going to be very beneficial for you. You're going to see a 10 times growth if you just chose the Victoria Gardens area. But there's lots of areas you can have this conversation in your community. And maybe in some areas you just do maybe a sub downtown area that's going to be like a 1 to 3, but at least have some measurements going forward on your math. So thank you. That was an hour. Sorry for I went over, but I think we can take the questions, or is there anything in chat or a question?
Thanks, Joe. That was great. I mean, it didn't feel like an hour, so I think there's no need for apologies. So far, we've got some folks on, and I'll just put out a reminder there for anyone who maybe joined us late. We've got a Q&A box, and it'd be great if you have any questions, go ahead and type them in, and Lori and I will help facilitate Q&A around those questions or other questions. And maybe while we give everybody a chance to catch up and find their chat box, we could just start with a couple of questions. And
Sure.
You know, I'm always really interested in the why. And from your perspective, I think it might be helpful just to hear one more time. Why should we care? Why does all this matter?
Yeah, I think you know, I'll say this, for me, this has been a sort of a journey. I remember when I worked in government, I was a zoning administrator, and anytime we had a financial conversation, the finance officer came in and they started talking finance gibberish. I was like, sorry, I have some serious zoning work to do, and I would leave. And I had no idea about the CAFR, the complexity of government seemed complicated. So I didn't have Lori helping me out. I was just like, gotta go, and I would leave. And I didn't understand that I actually had a role to play in this, you know, and that some of my silo was actually working against other silos because it was never explained. And the same is true, it's true internally inside government. It's even more so outside of government. As a taxpayer, you know, if I pulled the city of Asheville's budget, it even though I work in the industry, it seems complex. It seems difficult to understand. And so just at a level of communication, things break down. But also it's the way that our public discourse happens, where, you know, you show up, the motivated people are people that generally have a complaint to bring to their government. They're going to come off louder in the process than the majority of the population that's satisfied and doesn't show up. So we end up responding to a complaint and moving in that direction without understanding, is that complaint valid? Can we afford this complaint? We want to be well intended and hear from that individual and respond from a government standpoint, but what's the consequences and costs to doing that? So, you know, I want to have a greenway or a park like right there out my window. That would be really good for me. So if I kept on showing up at city council and demanded that, and I got my neighbors to ask for it, and we all showed up and we were organized, and my city followed through, well, what's the cost and consequences for everybody else in my community to pay for that? And you know, at one of our past conversations, I joked with you, Matt, and I said, I was like, I want to be 6 foot tall and have a full head of hair. I think you should pay for it. You know, it's like that's what ends up happening. My desires and wants have economic consequences. It makes me happy to have a full head of hair.
But I think that the slide that you show that tells that story so well is that city that's floating in the island. I don't know if you can show that one just here toward the end, where you're seeing how expenses, when we talk about expenses, we're talking about services. What does it cost to provide you amazing libraries and concerts in the park and responsive public safety, right? We want to see more match between expenses and revenues. And so that's why we care, because as we go into this general plan, as we think about how to plan the rest of the city as it builds out, how do we do better at achieving that? Really, because we want to provide quality services. We want to be that amazing community people want to live in and have their business in. But we need them, but it costs money. So we've got to try to get to that match. I think that's a good sort of bottom line of the why, Matt.
Well, it's also realizing, like, I mean, there's other things with the transportation system. We all want to have free flowing, moving traffic, and the engineers do a very good job at widening those roads and free flowing that traffic. The consequences are, who wants to live next to that? You know, so then you actually degrade the real estate adjacent to that road system, or at most you get maybe a strip mall because, hey, it's easy to get in and out of that thing. Well, there's a trade-off in that because you've just bought down the cost of that development pattern because you're not going to get that walkability or that like who wants to walk next to a freeway of cars whipping by at like 55 miles an hour? You can paint on the street all day long that it's a 45-mile-an-hour road, but visually, actually, let's just look at it. I mean, this is just straight out. This is your community straight out of Street View.
Oh, that's a great point.
It's like when you're painting on the road things for people to do, that's an indicator that the design is actually working against you. So the design of the road is giving you every physical indicator to go as fast as possible. You can see all the way down as far as the eye can see, and it's super wide lanes. Those lanes are of a design speed to make you go faster. So then you follow through and like paint on the road. Please don't go that fast. It's like that's not really helping you.
No, that's really great. Okay, Joe, I want to get to a couple of questions. Matt and I were sidebarring, going through some questions that we wanted to kind of bounce off each other in the very limited time we have available. And one of them, Matt, I wanted to ask you, as our kind of local expert here. I'm sure that a lot of folks will watch this recording and wonder, okay, well, so we see the point. We need to look at our land development patterns and look at them in ways that generate more money. But what does that mean for our more established neighborhoods? Like, what does that mean for Northwest Altaloma or the heart of Terra Vista that's really built out? How does that play out in the general plan?
There's going to be areas that you can do. If you go back to one of my original comments that this is a radiological plan or an MRI. In an MRI, you're going to see different things. And if you take that same kind of, let's step back and look at this abstractly, are there opportunities for smaller surgeries? So there's going to be sections of your town that are going to be invasive. It's going to be like, yes, you need a hip replacement. Sorry, that's not going to be easy. We're going to be changing your bone structure. But then there's going to be a smaller like outpatient surgery. Like maybe there's a parcel in a neighborhood that could grow up. It could be something a little bit more neighborhood servicey that you can walk to a neighborhood pub or a restaurant or something. It's going to be a little bit more dense. I'm just picking on these two areas, but what if there were on-street parking here and you lost a lane and this area on the left here redeveloped, and the trade-off was you're going to have on-street parking in this neighborhood. It's going to slow down a little bit from the traffic. It's going to be, you're going to be going through a little bit of a mildly congested area. There's a trade-off, but what do you get out of it? You get this whole neighborhood that's been here now has opportunity to walk to or bicycle walk to an area that's different for them. And it's hard. I think it's thinking forward what these places could be is going to be more complicated because you live there. It's almost like trying to reimagine your house once all your furniture's in. You're like, I live here. This is the way it is. But if I were to move in and be like, move your couch around, you'd be like, whoa, I never thought about that. Think about that baby picture. Go to areas around your region and find those, just play tourist in your own community and find those little moments of time that make you feel good. Go to downtown Temecula and take some pictures, or even just, you can measure it on Google Maps and see how much of your community could have little baby downtown Temecula's in it. It's not big. They're not big areas. That's one of the reasons why we dropped that Minneapolis. And as you can see, like, it's not a huge area of land that Minneapolis takes. It's surprising when you start thinking of your city a little bit differently that way. But you could find these little outpatient maneuvers that you could do within the neighborhoods that maybe it's a fallow parcel or something that's just kind of tired. That property owner might be willing to actually do a different development process, but if your zoning code's in the way, that it makes it more difficult for me to do that change. that should be another indicator that you have a process change. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. And I think one of the things that is somewhat profound about this paradigm, if you will, of thinking about the intersection of land use and local government finance. When you think about it as a city scale, there's something to be said for the notion of how embracing this idea actually provides us with an opportunity to help protect our established neighborhoods. And, you know, and Joe, you said a couple of things that really struck with me. You said we're living off the wealth of our downtown, you know, and you showed your diagram. In another discussion we had, you were explaining how, look, you have the purple spike in this small region of your city, and it's paying for all the neighborhoods. Like Lori said, all those services, all that infrastructure that make up the whole of the town, but it's that purple spike in a downtown that is a wealth center, and it helps provide for all those services and needs. And I think, so when we're thinking about how these ideas might fold into the general plan, it's really fascinating to think about how a strong downtown in Rancho Cucamonga could provide for help stabilize our existing neighborhoods. Those that have, for every reason, should remain as they are. They're good, complete neighborhoods. And like you said, there are other neighborhoods in the city or other centers in the city that help serve surrounding neighborhoods that maybe they do want or have the potential to grow up and provide more services and support for those local neighborhoods. But I think at a city scale, that's the thing that's the most profound.
What I think is kind of amazing about Asheville, now I'm just going to, not to drag my politics and my community into this, but you know, we're 90,000 people. We're smaller than you. And this building is in my downtown. And it's been there for 100 years. So 100 years ago, some lost civilization of humans built this 6-story building that's had 5 different lives. You know, it started as one kind of department store, flipped to a JCPenney, died, had a little life as some kind of weird thing, and then it came back as this mixed-use building. So that one piece of architecture has been recycled many times over. From an environmental standpoint, that hasn't become landfill. We didn't have to scrape that down to make it happen. So we just got to repurpose that building. And there was a time when this was commonplace, that this is how you built architecture of your city. And
Right.
It was incredibly environmentally productive, but also brought through several legacies of wealth beyond it. You know, so we could then harvest new wealth out of that same structure that was already there. So, and I think that's the kind of, for me, the sad part about how we've been building cities is that we lost that tradition of legacy wealth for future generations.
Well,
And
I
I think,
want to speak to
yeah,
that too, as we're running out of time, but it's important for folks to note too that that wealth building that's happening here, like on this parcel, that is the city sort of supporting that private wealth generation, right? So while the city is reaping benefit from taxable value and generating some revenue, the bulk of that benefit is accruing to the private sector. We're building wealth in companies and families. Those companies and folks are in turn employing people, creating jobs. We're starting to generate that economic engine, have that engine spin. So while your local government is benefiting from the taxes, the bulk of the benefits accruing to the private sector, where the job creation and economic engine is starting to really fire on all cylinders.
yeah, actually, I want to get to, there's a sort of a question, more of a comment out of Don Smith. Well, actually, a couple that Don's put in here. Don, thanks for the comment on the Civics book. I'm actually trying to get it republished. I've got the whole thing scanned. If you need a copy of it, it's mind-blowing. Kind of a little sad at the same time, but just email me and I could share you a copy of the entire book. But you know, one of your comments about patterns, in defense of the citizen, the majority of, actually all the voters in the city are property owners, residents. So in defense of the resident, they only know their own tax bill. So oftentimes we're kind of not consciously aware of where we fit into it. And I'll say this, y'all pay more taxes than we do in North Carolina, even though you have those wealth restrictions on how your valuation works. But one of the reasons why we did this model of Buncombe County was that I've got a lot more voters out in the county than we have in the city. and my county is kind of hostile to the city. So we've got people out here in Fairview who think they're paying a lot of taxes. They have no idea what we're paying as county taxes inside the city. So in their defense, they're going to show up and think they're paying high taxes until you give them information and evidence otherwise. And the same is true inside the city, that the suburbs inside Asheville that are primarily residential are less wealth production. And it's just a simple factor of the density on the site and the design of the architecture. But housing gets a lot of benefits inside the tax system that commercial properties don't. And it's just that's the reality of the tax system. But your comment is dead on. But this is more about we just all need to be on the same page, and that's why we do these math models so that everybody can see where you're at against your city. And even when you look at the residential neighborhoods, it's still not uniform because those that have the benefits of Prop 13 because they've been there longer are a lot less valuable than the newer ones. And that's just a perversity of the California tax model. There's a penalty on the new people that move into the community. They're paying at a higher rate. And that's the reality of your state tax system.
Yeah, it is. And it's particularly interesting that and exciting for me that we're having this conversation right now. As you mentioned, roads typically don't last more than 50 years. And here we are updating our general plan 40 years into our life. So over the cycle of this next general plan, that infrastructure bill is going to start coming due in a very significant way. So it's great that we have the opportunity to have these conversations right now. What we decide with this general plan is going to help set the tone for how that next generation of residents deals with their future and the services that they can provide. Yeah, that's some great comments in there by Don Smith, and that book on civics is outstanding. So what do you guys think? Do we have time for one more question?
Sure, why not? We're a little over time, but if that's okay with everybody.
Sure.
So let's see. Maybe Joe, it would be worth just leaving with a few last thoughts. You made a great point in the presentation that density isn't the driving value here. Driving variable that plays out the value. And I wonder, just as we're starting to think about our future, the future of the city and how that is codified in the general plan, what maybe handful of variables that affect the design of the built environment should we be thinking about if value per acre is important for us?
Definitely the amount of square footage on that property per parcel. So like things like buffers and stuff like that actually work against you. And I'm not knocking buffers. You need that for stormwater and other things, but you could actually create a stormwater resource as like a bank and have a water purification system that works well with the way that water wants to be worked. So think of like right now you're dealing with a big canal that goes through your community, which is a trade-off. So you basically push all your water into the canal in a storm event. A buffer does some of that and does on-site water retention. But what if you had a water bank and you traded water credit? So you got some more density in a certain area and you still didn't lose that water capacity. You just designed for it intentionally. Rather than, same way with parking. It's like in the case of this model here of Mountain Grove versus downtown Redlands, the reason why that one little block on State Street is doing all right is because there's a parking structure 2 blocks away that everybody can park in. So that's the trade-off, is that Redlands has a potent downtown because they organized the on-street part or the off-street parking as a structure. Temecula takes it to the next level and does it as a series of chips basically that are trade-offs with individual properties for density. The next level up is take that parking garage and just wrap it with taxes the way that we did in Asheville. And again, we just stole that idea from bigger cities basically. Places that are more landlocked are smarter about how they use their resources. So you can, we stole that from like Boston or Philly. They do that kind of stuff, but they're old cities that are landlocked. So we went to a different grandfather, if you will, and stole that genetic material. You can do the same thing. But if you just fret about, is there enough buffer? Well, it's like, that's probably the wrong conversation to have. It's just like, why on the buffer? And we, again, it's in the citizens' defense, we've just gotten into this pattern that we don't like the built world the way that it's happening, so we react against it and we want to put trees everywhere. I like trees, but trees don't pay taxes, and we need to be able to have them in their place that they can provide a good pedestrian experience for the street tree aspect and a good natural experience in a park aspect. But we end up in this middle space of suburbia where we don't get what we need. Does that make sense?
It does. Funny, a landscape architect once told me that his job was to make bad architecture look good by hiding it with shrubs and trees. So, it sounds like a big kind of meta principle.
I'm trained as an architect, and I'm just going to say, I'm kind of upset with my profession that we've lost the ability to create a well-proportioned, executable building that people love. I mean, really, like the good urbanism, the cities that we like going to are actually, from an architectural standpoint, pretty boring. You know, it's kind of just a facade up against the sidewalk with a nice storefront, and it's kind of not all that complicated. That J.C. Penney's building that I showed you in downtown Asheville, not all that complicated. Wilson's Jewelers on downtown Redlands, not all that complicated. Temecula. But, you know, architecturally, our profession rewards the zany architect that does something that appeals to them, but the majority of people don't really like it. And that's a sad reality of the design profession. I mean, there are urbanists out there that are trying to change that, and architects that are trying to change that, but they're working against 50 years of architectural education that has taken us otherwise. And so landscape architects filled the void by like shrubbing it up and kind of hiding the architecture. But that's really sad.
Yeah. Well, so it sounds like one of the maybe key takeaways is that we start thinking about whether or not we want to have a downtown area, and then kind of part and parcel to that is start thinking about those things that we maybe traditionally have required of individual property owners, that we start thinking about handling those things at a district scale. Just like we don't require people to drill their own well or build their own septic system on every single family parcel. Now we have district scale utilities that provide water that's clean and take away wastewater and clean it. We maybe start thinking about things like stormwater and parking as kind of that community-wide utility, and reap the benefit from more efficient use of land that comes from dealing with things at a different scale. So that's really fascinating. I appreciate that. So we are over then, and I really appreciate the time. The extra Q&A was great. So I think that means it's about time to call it a day, and we'll say thank you very much, Joe, for joining us. Hopefully next time we've got a vaccine or a cure, and we can have this discussion in person. So thank you very much for joining us.
You're going to remind people, Matt, about we've got the recording available. Encourage their friends to come and watch this recording. Yep, so it'll be available online on the General Plan website for everyone to come and see this really fascinating presentation and learn about this piece of the puzzle about the general plan.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for your time.
Lauren. Thanks, Joe.